I don't know if we told you, but we want you to be in the band. I was like, oh, I didn't know that.
Thanks for letting me know. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Music Musing. My name is Craig Seibert, and today I will be joined by my brother George Seibert. We love to talk about music. We're passionate about it, and it's a big part of our lives. Every once in a while we have these conversations, and we thought we'd just like to share those with you. So if you love music, sit back and enjoy this podcast. Okay, welcome back to Music Musing. This week I've got my brother George on the line.
How we doing?
Good, and I have a special guest, Peter Maloney. Peter Maloney, hello. How are you doing?
Good. Man, how you guys doing?
Good. Peter Maloney is a drummer and an artist, a painter. And when I say drummer, I mean he played with Dishwalla and he played with Tonic. And he played for quite a long time with Dishwalla, if I'm not mistaken, just under 10 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, about 10 years. I was in the band. I was a member of the band.
Yeah, you guys actually recorded. I think you recorded a couple of the albums? Or was that Tonic?
Yeah, no, I did. I recorded Opaline.
Okay.
The self-titled, the last studio record we did as a whole band, just called Dishwalla, and then we did live Greetings from the Flow State, which is a live record. Yeah. And then we did a bunch of sound. The first thing I actually did with them was a song for American Pie, the movie soundtrack.
Yeah, I saw that. They actually have you listed as composer on that, which I thought was interesting.
Oh yeah, we that was one of the big draws. Is they split everything down the middle as a band. There's no sort of so there's no battling, there's no infighting, and especially if the song is a single or it gets airplay, that's when the money starts coming in, and then you have guys fighting, and it's just an air. So that's what drew me to the band too. Was it was kind of all for one for all. So, but I'll tell you one really quick thing that's funny about the songwriting part of that. It was my first experience going to a premiere, and we had written that song in the singer. He had a makeshift studio in his parents' house that he had for years, and we got called to do a song for American Pie. Or did we do it? No, we were just demoing the song. We were just demoing it. So called Find Your Way Back Home. And we did it. We did it in his makeshift studio in a couple hours. And then they wanted it for the soundtrack. And then we got on the soundtrack. And then the premiere was happening. So for me, I was like, oh, it's great. I get to go to a premiere. I get to see all the stars. And I get to be like a rock star. And so we went to the premiere, and it was great. And then halfway through the movie, I'm like, oh, this is going to be like the Breakfast Club of this generation. I knew it was going to be a big smash. But the biggest part I was looking forward to was when the screen credits are coming up, seeing, Find Your Way Back Home, written by so-and-so, so-and-so, and my name, because I'd be like, yeah, sure. There it is. And so the rest of the band if a couple of the guys in the band are sitting in the front a row ahead of me, and we're watching, and I see Scott Alexander, J.R. Richards, Jim Wood, George Pendergrass, and he's the old drummer. And I sat there, and they just flipped around, looked at me like, oh, dude. And I'm just thinking, forever. Fucking ever. But luckily, the publishing didn't go to him, so that was good.
That's awesome.
Such a bummer, man.
What a great story. What a great story. Yeah, when we kind of talked a little bit before this about, what we were going to discuss, and, I was hoping for a fun story like that. That was really cool to start off like that.
Stuff.
Yeah. When I reached out to you, we've got a mutual friend that, Luis Malbus, and, it's when I reached out to you, it was kind of exciting because, like I said, we'd had this subject of the quote unquote post grunge bands, and we kind of wanted to talk about that at some point. We had it on our list of podcasts we wanted to do, and right. You totally fit into that. You fit into that spot where it was a band. I think Dishwalla had been around for 5 or 6 years before you actually got to them.
No, they had been only around for about a year. That just to give you a quick backstory,
please.
The reason why I encountered how I hooked up with Dishwalla was I was opening up. We had a tour with them, and I was working with an artist named Josh Clayton Felt. And Josh Clayton Felt was in a band called School of Fish. and School of Fish had a hit called 3 Strange Days.
Yep, I know.
So he released a solo album on A&M, and then we went out and toured, because a lot of times labels, they'll usually put another band with you, so you'll go out, supporting both records to try to get more momentum. Anyway, so we went out with Dishwalla for what was called the first album was called Pet Your Friends, and it was called the Pet Your Skis Tour. It was a winter ski tour, and it was cool. We went out for a while, and the first night I met them, the first night we met them on the tour, we joined them, was in Albuquerque. And I remember that because we were both in vans. And I remember the Dishwalla guys were psyched because 40 people had come to see the show. And it was 40 strangers for the first time that didn't know that weren't their bros. Because they lived, just to give you a classic, is they lived in Santa Barbara, which I wound up moving in Santa Barbara. But the night they got signed, they rented like a bus or a shuttle or something, and they took all of their friends. I mean, like 20 and 30 people went down to the show at Club Lingerie, and just to kind of give that energy. And then they literally got signed that night. But so they were still, it hadn't hit yet. Cannon Blue Cars hadn't hit, and then so we toured for about 6 weeks, and then after that tour, I ran into, the song blew up, and I ran into the singer at the Troubadour in Hollywood. And I was like, hey, man, I can't get away from the tune. I'm so happy for you guys. He's like, oh, thanks, great, blah, blah, blah. And a few months later, they call, and my girlfriend at the time was like, Dishwalla's manager's on the phone. And I was like, So, I was kind of like, hey, what's going on? He's like, hey, Pete, it's Dave. And he said, listen, we're in a bit of a pickle. Our drummer's injured, and we need you to come out on tour with us as a backup drummer. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? He said, well, we'll fill you in when you get here, but the tour, we're doing Sheryl Crow for 5 weeks, which was when she had the song Happy.
Oh, yeah.
So she was blown up, and they said, we're going to do a 5-week tour with Sheryl Crow. We're flying into New York tomorrow, and we start the tour on Monday. I was like, oh, shit. So
plenty of time to rehearse then.
Yeah, exactly, dude. So they fly me to New York, and I'm like learning all the stuff, the live versions and everything. And then we rehearsed for, it must have been 15 hours. I kid you not. I mean, I've never been so tired. I remember at the end of that rehearsal, they wanted to run the show one more time, and my hands were like shaking.
Oh.
Like I was like, I can't do it. I'm done. So anyway, what happened was I literally wound up being a pinch hit drummer. Like a pinch hitter, the drummer had hurt his arm, shoulder injury and a nerve. I think it was a rotator and had some nerve damage in his arm. Oh. So they were touring so much. When a single hits, and I'm sure it's the same now. The label just pushes down pedal to the metal. They're like, let's make as much money and sell as many. So you are on the road we go out for 2 years. So you're out for 18 months.
Wow.
And, so he started to have damage in his arm, his shoulder, and he just kept playing through it, which was not a good idea, unfortunately. So he started having trouble getting through the show. So literally the first night, he said, here's what's going to happen. I learned the show top to bottom, and he said, I'm going to play, and then when I can't do it anymore, I'm going to look over at you, I'm going to shake my head, we're going to drop the lights, and you're going to switch places. And so that's literally what we did. And the thing that was kind of a freaky thing to see was his arm, it was just, it just was like almost like it would just flop, onto the drum. And it was like, oh my God. So I would come in, and the thing that was pretty funny is I'm a tall guy, and George was not he's a smaller guy, but he likes to sit really, really low, and I like to sit high. And so I had to adapt to his kit. So it was like everything was foreign, but eventually, I got into the groove of it, and we did the whole tour with Sheryl Crow, and then things kind of just slowly evolved. I never sort of tried to get the gig or get in the band or sort of, work my way in. I was as pro as I could be. And then he left, and they said, you want to start working with us and Find Your Way Back Home. That song was kind of the first day. They're like, I don't know if we told you, but we want you to be in the band. I was like, oh, I didn't know that.
Thanks for letting me know. Appreciate
it. Yeah. So it was pretty funny.
At the time that you were pinch drumming, was the song still big? Was Counting Blue Stars Cars really big?
Oh yeah, it was the Pet Your Friends tour, and it was huge, and it was the tour was great because her record was hitting, and we played these vaudeville theaters all around the country, and now they've redone most of them, so they're really sweet, really great venues to play. But it was great. I mean, I have no complaints about that.
Now, you did the whole tour pinch drumming, to use your word. Like, I mean, he would play like a couple songs or 3 songs, 5 songs, then you'd step in every night, or just did it eventually get less and less songs, or did you get more and more time as it went on, or
all of the above?
Yeah.
The first, it started off with he tried to get through the set, but I'd say probably in the first week he started to have trouble. Really? So by second week, I was already doing most of the show, most of it. And then eventually he went home.
Oh, wow.
And I finished the tour. I finished the whole tour. So I think he, because they said just go home and get, well, and then,
sure,
we just kept going. So, and they're a great band, so I had a great time.
Well, maybe I'll jump into that actually the first question that I kind of wanted to touch on then. So at that point in time, you were writing with them. You were writing with the band. You were actually making music and putting your input in and doing stuff. And as you guys got to a new album that didn't have Counting Blue Cars on it,
right,
and you went out and started playing shows, you wanted to share those new songs and get people into the new ideas.
Right.
And I shared with you, but I'll share with the podcast real quick. Our local band opened up for Seven Mary 3 years ago in Tampa, Florida, Ybor City, Florida. And we got to go backstage and talk to them. And I had been a huge fan of Seven Mary 3 for a long time. So getting to talk to the guitar player was just fantastic. I sat there for half an hour, but the singer was noticeably upset. And through conversations with him and the drummer and him and other people that came back, I realized that they were supporting a new album. They were trying to get that new sound out. They wanted people to hear what new stuff they'd written. But he said he was just so upset because it seemed like the crowd was completely dead until they played Cumbersome, which was their big hit.
Yep.
And did you experience that? Was that something that you saw and felt out there? Because I mean, I know you feel a crowd. With playing what little bit I did on stage, I know that you can feel a crowd. You can tell when they're into it and you can tell when they're not. Did that experience come through?
Oh yeah. I mean, well, it's funny. We did a bunch of shows with 783. I want to say we did like a short run with them. I can't remember, but yeah, because, it's kind of like even when you go see the bands that you've loved forever and you go see them and they have their new song and you're kind of like, okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom or I'm going to go get the beer and then come back or, But that's kind of, that thing is always there. And if you only have, a couple hits at the time, and since it was fresh off the first record, you're playing catch up. You're always chasing after that big hit. And sometimes it's a blessing and a curse because you can't never play it. I mean, you literally can never play it. But I will say this much. For me, it was new, the whole record. So I was you're kind of jazzed playing it because it's all new music and you're just getting into it and having a great time. But the one thing someone asked me was, do you ever get tired of playing Counting Blue Cars or If You Could Only See with Tonic? And the answer, believe it or not, is no. I get much more tired of playing all the other stuff. And the reason is because when you play in front of a different audience every night and you play the song that everyone knows and everybody brings, every town and every audience and every person brings their memory and their emotion to the front when you're playing that song. And it recharges you every time, especially, we do the classic where we break it down and they sing the verse. But I mean, it's pretty amazing when you're playing and you see 10,000 people or 5,000 people singing words of the song you were part of.
That's the best explanation I've ever heard on it. I really, because I've heard other guys say, they get tired of playing that hit or they refuse to play that hit or whatever. Even if you've got multiples, I think that's the best explanation I've heard, because as a musician, to feel that energy and to know, like you said, everybody brings their A game if it's that song that, maybe they met their girlfriend to or whatever it is, or they that was their high school graduation song, whatever it is. Exactly. I think that brings that extra vibe. And I think that's a super great way of looking at it. That's really great to hear somebody that enjoys playing the songs that, you know, a lot of people, or shouldn't say a lot of people, I don't know. I mean, that you would think they would get tired of playing, you know, just that, if it's one song or a couple songs, you would think that you play it, you know, 200 nights a year, you'd think it would get old. But I mean, if it's, if everybody's screaming at the top of their lungs till they go hoarse, that one song, I'm like you. I think that would charge my batteries every night. I think it's a great explanation.
And I know when we played out, what little bit we played out, it was a kind of a group meeting, you know, the day before of, hey, where do we want to put this song? Hey, where do we want to put this song in the set?
Right.
I assume that's a lot of what you guys consider too. Is, I mean, obviously you don't want to play it in song 2. You don't want to, you know, boil the water early.
Yep.
But, do you always like set it for an encore? Do you always set it for like the last song, hey, we're done? Is it something you guys, obviously you know, it sells tickets. You know that when you go to a town and they're going to come see you guys, that's one of the songs they're paying basically to see. So are you really cautious, or is it just always last song?
No, actually, if my memory serves me correctly, I think we played County Blue Cars halfway through the set.
Oh, okay.
And then what we do is we come back out for an encore, but we used to do Darling Nikki from Purple Rain.
Oh, nice.
And,
good song.
And it's a great song. And I got to say, without, you know, sounding too biased, I mean, the singer in Dishwalla, J.R. Richards, in my opinion, is one of the greatest, if not the greatest rock and roll singer I've ever worked with. And I've gotten to work with some really powerful singers, great singers. But this guy, his natural gift for singing, I used to, as a drummer, there's a lot of drummers, this always cracked me up. Some drummers, nowadays you have what's in-ear monitors. So kind of to save your hearing, you don't have monitors. But back then, you know, when we first started out, you know, we had big wedges and monitors, you know. And for me, I always wanted the drums lower and the band higher so I could hear the band and get into it. Where I guess it's much more the norm, at least I've learned from other, you know, monitor guys, that a lot of drummers just like to hear themselves. and I can't get into it. You know, I just cannot get into it. So I have the vocals usually pretty hot in my monitors. And goddamn, JR never sang out of tune. I don't literally think, I mean, in terms of perfect pitch, I don't think he actually had the ability to say. I remember him getting off stage, he was always hard on himself, and he'd say, oh man, I didn't sing that, you know, and I remember stopping him, I'm like, bro, you're like a freak of nature, because I've played with a lot of people, and believe me, I know out of tune when I hear it, and you are not one of those guys. But yeah, it was, yeah, it was amazing. So also too, he sang. Here's the one thing that I will say about when you play a hit, especially early on. I think you really it's kind of like you owe it to the audience, in my opinion, because I was that way when I was a kid. When the hit's fresh, play it like the record. Play it like the record, because if you deviate too much from that, unless you've got like a full catalog of hits, people get really bummed out.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. I was just thinking the same thing. I would just you saying that sentence, I almost went into panic. But I was like, oh my god, why would you play it wrong? Why would you play it wrong? You know.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one thing. You know, that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that in looking at the history of me playing out and the history of me going out and seeing bands, I don't think there's been any time where I've stopped and went, wow, that song's not like it is on the radio. I think I go out to watch shows just to hear the changes, or to hear the differences you get in live.
Right.
And I actually still play it. I play it in a local church, and we have inner ear monitors with, we use iPads to mix. We can do our own individual mix.
Sure.
And I'm kind of the same way. Like I usually have myself out, because I played so much on stage. I kind of know, you know, what I'm playing anyways. I know how it's going to sound in the house. But I really take me out, and I don't put the drums in only because I'm standing right next to them and I can feel them anyways.
Right.
But I usually have like the bass and the keys and the singer and everything up louder where I can hear them, because that makes me feel the music more. That makes me feel the team more, feel like a whole team concept. So I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, for sure. And I will tell you one really funny eye-opening experience that happened on that first tour was, so the drummer couldn't go to Japan. He just says, you want to go to Japan? I'm like, sure, So
Yes.
my first time in Japan, but a lot of my friends had been to Japan. And they said, one of my friends said, hey, listen, man, I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up. And I said, what's up? He goes, when you go over there, the audiences are really polite. So you may be kicking ass and, killing the show, but they may just be quiet in between the songs. But they're loving it. And I was like, are you serious? He goes, yeah, you're not going to feel any energy. They're just going to be packed with people. And then you're going to finish the song and just like either clap politely or be silent. So I was like, fucking hey. And it was the first time we went over there. And so we went over there and played. And right before we did the show, I said to the guys, I told them the same thing. I said, listen, so-and-so told me this, and I just figure we should all know this, that if we're kicking ass out there, it may seem like we're not, because apparently they're just going to go dead quiet, and we just got to keep going. But it doesn't mean we're not doing a great show. And they're like, okay, cool. I'm like, so let's go have a great show, and we'll just deal with that new vibe. Couldn't be further from the truth. Fucking further. I mean, when I say I remember it was like, and I would never compare myself to the Beatles, but in terms of like the excitement, it was unbelievable. And so we started playing, and I'll never forget, we kicked in, and they went so fucking crazy that I remember this. I got chills as I was playing, and the singer, all he did was he turned around and he just mouthed to me. He's like, "Oh my God," and so it couldn't have been more amazing. And then the even more so was the fan approach in Japan is unbelievable, in the sense that you really feel like you're a freaking superstar. So we were up there, and we were hanging out for a while, like a couple hours. There was a guy, and I don't know if he does it anymore, and I think his name is Mr. Ito. I think that's his name. I could be wrong. This guy brought the Beatles over to Japan. Wow. He's a legend. And so he brought us over, and that was, he must have retired not too long after that, but I was like, God damn, this is fucking Mr. Ito. So we're spending time talking to him, and I'm just absorbing it all. So we were probably up in the dressing room for a couple hours. So usually by then people have gone, with a few people that want to hang out and get an autograph. Well, we come downstairs and everybody's out there, and there's hundreds of people, and I'm like, whoa. And I kid you not, you guys, this is true. We walk out and I'm kind of like, hey, what, and they're like, Peter, and they knew I played with Josh. They knew everything. And at one point I'm kind of walking slow, and then they start grabbing me. And the person from the label was like, Peter, you must get in the van now. And I was like, no, this isn't really. She's like, please get in the van. And you get in the van, and seriously, they're like kind of grabbing the window, and the whole deal. So it was like, I got to say, it was such a freaking 360 from what we thought it was going to be. It was amazing,
Yeah, and I don't know, was he just trying to trick you or make you?
I don't know, you think that? Maybe I think he played a jazz trio. Maybe that was it.
Or maybe they just weren't that good. I don't know.
Maybe they just weren't that good. Yeah, right.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, the other kind of gear that I wanted to switch to was, you had a lot of experiences in bands that were, quote unquote, the post grunge era bands.
Yeah.
And what my brother and I had actually initially wanted to talk about at some point in time was those bands and where they fit and how they got labeled that, because it seemed like it was one of those things where, and George, I know you'll probably echo me on this. It really felt like the big grunge movement died with Cobain, and that, that bands still carried on like Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and them, but it just felt like there wasn't the same energy, and the bands started, the sound started changing.
Yeah.
The sound started changing to Sponge and Blink 182 and, you guys, Dishwalla and Tonic and all those types of bands that weren't really hard rock, like, that came out in the early 2000s or late 90s, but they also weren't grunge. I mean, they were in that middle range.
Yeah, we're in the middle. Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I will say, like, I remember being in a band. We lived in Hollywood. I was in another band, and we struggled for years. And we were in Hollywood, trying to make it. And actually, the bass player from Tonic was in that band with me. So that's how we kind of all wound up being this cyclical thing. But that was still back when the hair bands were big, the metal bands. And you go walking down Sunset Strip, and these dudes would be everywhere. And back then, it was you'd hand out flyers, and they used to have this thing at a lot of these clubs. It was called Pay to Play. And it was such a scam. Yeah. I mean, it was they would give you a certain amount of tickets, and they would say you have to sell this many tickets to break even, and then any other tickets you sell above that, you get to keep it. Well, when you're a new band, you don't sell all the tickets. You wind up paying to play the freaking gig. It's ridiculous. So
hey, I'm going to interrupt you, but sure. George, does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
So to open for Seven Mary 3, that's what we had to do. We had to sell 300 tickets, and we ended up buying the last 50 ourselves. So you're right. We were basically paid to play. I know the exact feeling.
Same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, we, at one point when we were, and then I remember Nirvana hit, and man, talk about if there's any band that can be categorized as revolutionary in my time, it's them, because literally after they hit, it was done. Like the metal hair, it was just decimated. It went from complete crazy, like hot, metal and just these crazy guys and everything to a freaking ghost town, and everyone's wearing the plaid shirts and doing the freaking full-on grunge.
Birkenstocks, totally changed the scene. Yeah.
Totally changed the scene, and then and it's a good question. I don't know how it's sort of all I think it sort of formed that.
I think they wanted some sort of. They didn't. I'm speaking just out of conjecture. I think the radio wanted something that they could sell without the show, like Poison, Warrant. Pick one of those hair metal bands. They were a show. Yeah. I mean, Motley Crue back in the 80s. I mean, it was assless chaps and teased out hair in the whole 9 yards. Yeah. You had to see that to get the full experience. And I think once grunge hit, it was like, okay, we don't really want to see these mopey people in their coffee house or whatever. I mean, they just want to listen to it was more about the music than the show. Yeah. And I think bands like Dishwalla, bands like Tonic, bands like Seven Mary 3, I think bridged that gap a little bit where it was still good heavy rock, not necessarily metal, but it wasn't that over the top grunge heavy dark stuff. It was a little more radio friendly. Yeah. And I think you guys kind of bridged that gap between all of that. It got kind of a quagmire of the music scene there in the early 90s between hair metal and grunge, and radio was kind of shrugging their shoulders like, what do? We need something to play on the radio that they don't have to go see. And I think you guys bridged a lot of that gap, and I think that's why I kind of, because back in the day I couldn't afford CDs even. I mean, so I listened to the radio a lot.
Yeah, sure, of course.
And then that's what kind of formed a lot of my musical tutelage, was what was being played on the radio. What's fresh now? And then once I started listening to stuff, once the radio started playing it, then I go buy the CDs because Dishwalla, I can't even pronounce the name. I'm not going to buy the CD. But Nirvana, they've got a song on the radio. I'm going to buy that one. And I think I think you guys bridged that gap.
But what you kind of mentioned though about that whole grunge era was almost like a cliff, though. Like when that song, Nirvana had Bleach out before, and it was a little more light and punk. Right. But as soon as Nevermind hit, it was like a cliff. It's like all those guys just fell off a cliff. Yeah. And when Cobain died, it didn't really, it tapered on and kind of mixed into what your guys' sound was. Yeah. Like the Seven Mary 3 band and stuff like that. So, I don't know, when you started playing, did you feel any of that wash over? And did you play with any hair bands? Did you actually get a show where you were playing with?
Yes. Actually, I will say real quickly, Tonic, one of the gigs we did not too long ago was with Bret Michaels.
Oh yeah,
we opened up for him, and that was that was a riot. But we actually we didn't do. I remember we didn't actually open for a metal band, but I remember we were in St. Louis. I think it was St. Louis, and Warrant was there at the same time. And then so they came on. They kind of came and found us, knocked on the bus. They came on the bus, and we were all just talking shit for a while. But I don't think we ever. That was actually a funny show, and the reason why I tell you that is because some club owners and promoters, they don't give a shit who you are. They're basically like, curfew is at, let's say 12 midnight. If you go past 12 midnight, I'm going to shut the power off. And I didn't believe it, so we were playing, we were in the middle of the encore, and so we're just playing. All of a sudden, and I remember I got monitors at that point, all of a sudden I just hear drums, and I'm like, oh, my monitors are out. And then I'm looking around, I'm like, wait a minute, it's just drums. So at that point, I'm like, I just kept playing, and then they're just like, they just literally unplugged us. But wow. I don't remember. I think we just had shows alongside of them, but we were clearly like you were saying with 7 Mary 3, we were always bunched with that same, of band. But yeah, it's totally different.
I mean, that makes sense that you play with us. I was just kind of curious how that felt at that time to we're pretty close to the same age. So we listened to hair metal, we listened to that stuff, and I love Poison. I love Poison when they were out. They had their time though, but like I said, it seemed like when you got to the end of Nirvana, where they stopped and were kind of Soundgarden moved into a little bit of a lighter sound, that those guys just disappeared like completely. Like you couldn't even I mean, you couldn't even hear it on the radio. You couldn't go to a show and see them because they were gone. They were completely gone.
It's almost like the art world too, because I do art, and it's it's kind of like when Keith Haring or Basquiat came out.
Basquiat,
everything changed, and all of a sudden an artist that was prolific and really popular, all of a sudden he was old news, and nobody, it was like cheesy to own a guy like that. And then because it's just the next wave of what's in, and that's the thing about pop music in general is you always have bands like Wilco and Lucinda Williams and these great artists that can constantly have a thriving career for years because they ride under the radar, so to speak, in the sense that when you go pop and you have a hit, you are kind of it's a shame in a way, but you have to either equal that hit or top it. And if you don't, you go into the category of, as we know, one-hit wonders. And then your career is basically based on that song, and you start, you do gigs and you just kind of regurgitate yourself and you play that song, and it's great. But that is one thing I'll say. You want to be on the radio, you want to be huge, you want to have success, but depending on which avenue you go, it can actually it can drive you crazy because you can never match up to the same thing you were trying to get before. And then if you get pigeonholed into one-hit wonder, good luck, because it's hard to get away from that stigma, really hard.
Well, and I think the longevity of bands is really starting to shorten nowadays. I think the bands that started around that grunge era and even past that, and into the late 90s, early 2000s, you guys toured a lot. You guys did a lot of either supportive new albums or playing the old stuff for quite a long time. But you look at bands nowadays, like you mentioned Wilco, and Wilco's, they've been making really good stuff for a long time.
You all right?
Yeah, we're good. But you mentioned Wilco, and they've been making music for a really long time, and really good, solid music. But it seems like bands nowadays, even past that mid 2000s, early 2000s, they get like one or two albums and then they're turned off almost completely.
Absolutely. I will say that, when we were on A&M, we were the last, someone said, you should teach a music class at some university. They were telling me something, and I said, I couldn't teach a music class now because nothing I grew up, nothing I had with my experiences in the music business would at all be relevant to what's going on. Completely. And when we were I will say this, that I think the post grunge era bands, that alternative bands like Dishwalla, and I can honestly say we were the last era of bands where you couldn't get away with being mediocre. You couldn't get away with sort of fixing everything in the mix. You had to know how to play, and you only had a few resources. You had radio, you had television live talk shows, and you had some MTV, but you didn't have all these crazy avenues like YouTube and everything under the sun. So we were still part of that last era where when you got signed back then, for example, you were called a baby band, and you would get signed on a label like A&M. And back then, they would have this strategy, and it was kind of like 3-record strategy. They sign you to 3 records because they look at it like the first record, we're going to start to build you, by second this way, and then by third, you're going to hit your stride, like almost like they used to do in the 70s. And that's why bands, we know the whole catalog of those bands, and they lasted so long, is because the labels grew them into stars.
Absolutely.
And with us, and not only that, they spent a shitload of money. So back then, a standard baby band deal was usually about $350,000 to $400,000 to sign the band, record the band, and then that would be your touring money. Nowadays, I don't even know if they do anything. I don't know if there's that much tour support like there used to be. I don't know, but the label invested a lot of money, time and money, so they want to get that money back. So they'll usually have you, stick around for at least a few records. But yeah, now it's kind of like throw it up on the wall. If it doesn't stick, you're gone.
Yeah, it's funny because you said something in there, and I can't see my brother's face because it's a little small icon on the screen. We're doing this video as we're talking, but I could see the look in his eyes as soon as you talked about guys that had to have talent to actually stay alive at that point in time. And there's a lot of guys with talent out there, but like you said, there's really not much of a backing. There's really not. There's not record labels knocking down people's doors looking for things to sell because they make money on merch and they make monies on on how many YouTube hits they get now, not necessarily the band going out and playing a show.
Yeah.
So you either get extremely good talent that never gets heard, or you have extremely mediocre talent that they're trying to push as their last hurrah as a record company and trying to get enough money off this one hit, like you said, before it goes away. And I could just see my brother just cringing as that was coming out.
We've gone rounds and rounds and rounds about nowadays. There's, like you said, it's this sea of mediocrity that there's a few flashes of brilliance, but like I said, you guys, and I'm not even ashamed. I mean, as a big fan, I love the song. Dishwalla and Tonic. I still listen to them. And another friend of mine, we're just talking about it because I brought this situation that we're doing now up, and I'm like, it's cool, but nowadays, I say nowadays that. It's sad. It's almost sad that there's not that push, that there's not that grooming, that there's not bringing bands up and bringing them along. Like, drafting a quarterback and making him, sit behind a Hall of Famer for a season before you start him, this type of theory. It's, what have you done for us now? How can you make us money this minute, let alone this week or month or year? It's now. When can we release this YouTube video? When can we get it out there?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't have 1 million hits by 4 a.m. tomorrow morning, we're moving on to the next person. It's literally, it's sickening because there's being music lovers and players and purveyors of podcasts trying to get other people involved or to listen or to hear or to find new music. It's a sea of mediocrity. There's very little, and there's a lot of good stuff happening, but it's really hard to weed through all the crap to find it because it's tough nowadays. Because radio play, and my brother and I talked about this at great length, radio play is, I think radio is close to being dead because I can listen to contemporary radio, classic rock radio, or pop radio and hear the same, Bon Jovi songs or the same, Journey songs and the same, AC/DC songs on all three. And they like, well, you know what? This worked. So we're just going to, clench it between our tight little fist until we stop squeezing blood out of it. And there's nothing wrong with the music, but it is sad that they don't push new inventive, that there are some really great bands, some really talented cats playing music now and putting music out. But I think a lot of them are discouraged at at the sea of, fear of the unknown. I mean, well, what are we gonna?
Yeah,
can we make money doing it?
Well, yeah, exactly. What was really cool was one of the guys that was pushing Opaline, which we actually, the single we had got up there. I mean, we didn't break the top 20, but we were, I guess, around 20, I forget, 20, 28 or something. Anyway, long story short, one of the guys that was our record guy, he's a regional record rep. And what this guy does is he basically takes you to the town where he's covering these states. And you go into the radio stations. And before YouTube and stuff, this is what you do. I used to call it the hurdy-gurdy, because you would go into these radio stations, right? And the label, you wanted that, they call it the ad. You wanted that ad because there's usually about 4 or 5 pivotal stations, in the country. K-Rock used to be one. There was one in Atlanta, New York. You had to get the ad at those radio stations to go from previous top 20 to, a million records. And in doing that, you had to do a lot. You guys there? Sorry, man.
Oh, yeah, that's all right.
You have to do a lot of ass kissing. So what they would do is the label would actually buy the radio station people pizza. And we would go into, and everybody did this, by the way. This isn't just us with Sheryl Crow, it's everybody. And you literally go into this conference room, and these fucking people come in during their radio break, or during lunch break, and they're eating the pizza, and we're playing for them. Like, please add us, play. And then you go from one to the next to the next. You can't believe, but I will say this much. One of the guys that was our rep, his name was Jeff. He had been around since the 70s. This guy was the kookiest dude, but he was a rep for Some Girls, Stones. He was Presence, Zeppelin. He did Foreigner's first record. And, we thought when we met him at the label, he was just a kooky guy. And so when we started to do regional stuff with him, I'm like, this guy's a classic. I wonder and everybody in radio loved him. They loved him. And I understood why, because of his breadth of experience. And so we used to talk endlessly about it. And I was like, Jeff, what the fuck is the difference between when you were promoting Zeppelin and now promoting a band like Dishwalla? What was the difference in that era? And he said, he said, first off, Clear Channel had not taken over. We called the Clear Channel the Death Star because literally before that, every station was owned by its own, they had their own owners, which meant that, I don't know, you remember when you guys grew up, it was like, I remember listening to Zeppelin. I'd hear every song off the Zeppelin records or Rush or Van Halen. So when I went to the show, I knew the whole record because every station was independently owned, which means every station manager just played what they wanted to play. And a lot of times what Jeff told me was, that was by instruction of the band. He said that Zeppelin was like, you will never release one song as a single. Never. And also, he said the other thing they did was, obviously they were in that place of power where they could do that. But the other thing he said that I thought was really interesting was he goes, nowadays, the media and the press, like, you have to kiss so much ass to get, like, attention in that world. Back then, where, like he said, Aerosmith, I think that was one of the bands they used. I think it was Aerosmith or Stones. They would basically pick the people in the media. They'd be like, that one, and they got 5 minutes. And that was it. And then they always retained this sort of mystique where now it's like, oh, what do you want? We'll do this. Yeah. Okay. We'll do that. Whatever. And one thing I will tell you, this will trip you out, is I remember having a conversation with one of the radio stations. And this is the thing that really was a drag, especially with Clear Channel. I don't know if you guys know, but you know how when you hear on the radio, such and such radio presents Dishwalla live, blah, blah, blah. Well, the actual term presents is equal to an actor having his name first at the title of a movie in terms of a radio station. So I didn't know. I had no idea what that was about. And I'm talking to this one guy. First, we go to dinner with this one radio station. Well, literally turns around and goes, I want to go on a fishing trip with my brother. I need another band in here to get me on that trip. Like, basically have the label pay for my trip. He was such an asshole. So that was my first, wow, okay, wow. Payola is not dead. If you get a chance, there's a book called Hitmen. Have you guys heard of that book?
No, but I will be writing it down right now.
It's called Hitmen, and it's about that whole world. And, man, the politics about it I could go on and on, but this is a key example. There was a guy, and I don't know if he's still around. This was his job. He was the gatekeeper, like in Monty Python. When they try to cross the bridge, they're trying to what's the path? What's
your favorite color?
Yeah, exactly. And so this guy, he was paid $50,000 by every single band just so he would open the gate for you to get to radio. That was a fee you had to pay. And I learned all of this because when we signed with this band, with this label Emergent, which was a small label. We were on Interscope. A&M was bought out by Interscope. The guy from Seagram's, they bought Interscope. And so literally we just went from A&M, a label that loved the band and was supportive, to Interscope. And they literally dropped every band that was not a gold and above. So they're like, wow. drop them. Okay, Dishwalla, they go, okay, we'll keep them. But they don't do anything. So we literally were in a position where, believe it or not, we went to Interscope, went to the president and said, we want off. Just let us go because you're not doing anything. You're just leaving us here. So he let us go. And we signed with a smaller label that was the polar opposite. It was filled with a team of people that had been seasoned radio and record label people, and they were totally behind it. But that's how I learned the whole thing. And I was amazed at some of these people, their jobs. Literally, I could go on and on. I could tell you stories that would just it's unbelievable. I just read a book.
Well, I was just thinking that. I was just thinking, we got into this conversation about, the bands that you played in because it kind of fit into that post-grunge era, but you've got so many stories about the markets and the media and the companies that you work with. And, I had a very, very small taste of it. We did local shows only. We wanted to get signed, but we didn't really pursue it. We had family lives and stuff.
Sure.
But listening to some of these stories, it almost makes me think, I didn't want to do this. Do I want to go through, things like that where it's the old adage, it's greasing the palms. You basically said the exact same thing that's been happening for years and years in pretty much every media.
Yep.
You put money in people's hands and that will get you somewhere.
Yeah.
And man, but you guys have written and made so much good music that it pains me to know that there's bands out there that can write good music and can write new music, but can't ever get anywhere because they choose not to do that. They choose not to put the money in somebody's palms.
And that's what it is, Greg. It's like, it's playing the game. And let me tell you, I was still like new blood, and we were all still young and, hungry in our 20s. And man, I grew up in Jersey, and, I've always bucked in first gear, so to speak. So I was ready to freaking do what we needed to do. And, so the band the label would come to me to sort of be the guy that would grease the palms. For example, this was hilarious. The label rep, and I'm sober, by the way. I've been sober before I got on the road, and I was like the crazy guy. So, which is a totally different time of music too. But anyway, so the label, one of the people from the label came up to me. She goes, "So Pete, so you're kind of the guy that likes to go out and have fun, right?" I said, "Yeah, on the road." And she said, "Okay, well, we have a favor to ask of you. We need you to do something for this record." And I said, "Okay, what is it?" Well, this guy that was on the East Coast, there used to be distribution for records. They used to be called one stops. That was where you'd go, and that's where the people manufactured the records. And then there used to be record stores. So you'd have these guys that they were the ones responsible for putting all of your records in every store all over the country. Well, this guy was the Northeast guy. He covered the Eastern Seaboard. He was the guy. And you had to get in his good graces. You had to grease his palm, or he was like, fuck it, right? So she said to me, "Well, we're going to go to Vegas, and we're going to fly him in." And I said, "Okay. Limo's going to pick you up, and you're going to go pick him up." I said, "Okay. And we're going to give you a card, and you're going to just make him happy." And I was like, Wait a minute. What does that mean? They go, whatever you gotta do, you make them happy. I'm like, let me get this straight. Am I getting a credit card from the label to freaking give carte blanche to take them to freaking, the Bunny Ranch and, all this shit? And they're like, whatever you gotta do. Well, it turns out we got the limo. We're sitting. His flight got, it was like snowed in or a storm, and he never came. So we were just sitting there in the limo. And nothing happened.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was a small label, bros. I mean, that was not like big labels that's even bigger than that.
See, that would have been way too tempting, having a blank check in Vegas and, nobody shows up.
Well, actually, it was funny. The limo driver was like, you guys still want to go to the Bunny Ranch?
Well, now that we're already
for that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I've been out of it in terms of the business side of it, but I can only imagine it's still just as corrupt as it ever was.
I can't imagine it's gotten any better. Yeah, I mean, I was never a part of it, but I can't imagine they got better.
It's a good I hate to say stopping point, because I thoroughly enjoying this conversation, but I wanted to try and keep it under an hour, but I got a couple real quick things for you. What I usually do with my brother at the end of every episode is what's called a parting shot, where I kind of throw something that he usually hates at him and then he discusses it with me. So I was looking through your history. Edgar Winters?
Yeah, Edgar Winter. Oh man, I'm glad you said that one. That's a good one to close on. That's a good one to close on. I got called. Well, I was doing session work for quite a bit, and I decided I wanted to join Dishwalla because I wanted to be in a band. So I left the session world and I moved to Santa Barbara, and I was in a band for 10 years. Well, I came back to LA after I left Dishwalla, and I started to get back into doing sessions again. Well, I got called to play a song on Edgar Winter record. So I was like, oh, this is awesome, and so I went down. But the funny thing is, dudes, is my drums, I hadn't sort of changed heads, and they sounded like shit. So they get to the studio, and I didn't know he was. So I get there, and he's there, and I'm like, oh, fuck. Because a lot of times now what's different about the back in the day is many times when I've done sessions, I don't even meet the artist. I just come in and I play to a vocal and a scratch track and a click, and that's it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so but this time he was there, and so I'm really like, oh god, I hope he doesn't come in here and freaking hear my drums. In walks Edgar Winter, right? And this guy is a classic, and it really shows you. He personified how great you had to be back then. He has a very high voice, kind of like Kermit the Frog. So he's like, hey, how you doing? And we started talking, and he said, well, what I'm gonna do, he was playing with Ringo's All-Star Band at the time.
Oh wow.
I wrote a song for Ringo, and it's called Peace and Love, because that's Ringo's whole mantra. And here's what he goes, here's what I want you to do. We're gonna do this song as a demo, and I want Ringo to hear it. So I want you to play as much like Ringo as you can. And I kind of froze. I said, excuse me.
God.
I'm like, so you're asking me to play like Ringo for Ringo? To hear it? Exactly. And I was like, okay. And then he goes, and the thing is, I need the drums to sound really kind of wonky and not that great. I was like, I'm in. But I will say the last thing that happened was it wound up just getting on the they just used the track. But the last thing that happened was I remember this guy, man, his talent. I was literally doing a take, and this one take I did a fill. In my mind, after I did the take, I was like, I don't know if I like that fill. That's all I saw at the moment. I finished the take, but I got it to click, and we went in to listen to playback. And Edgar Winter, he's there listening. He goes, this one fill, it sounds like you didn't know if you really liked that fill. I mean, literally, I was like, oh my God, you have freaking ears on you like you wouldn't believe. But
so he called you out.
Yeah, it was that guy. Those guys, every time we played with bands from that era, you got to rise. I mean, Dishwalla, we did 4 shows with Cheap Trick, and man, you had to ass, because they kick ass still. But yeah, it's a good one. Edgar Winter was a good one.
Well, Pete, I gotta tell you, this is an amazing conversation. I really appreciate you joining us on here. What I want to do though is I want to share that inside of you. You mentioned painting, and I looked, the site I've got, and correct me if I'm wrong, is PeteMaloney.BigCartel.com.
Yeah, or it's also just PeteMaloney.org.
Okay, that works too. But going through there and looking at some of your art, some of it's just amazing. And you and I kind of had a little conversation a couple of days ago about art in general. And I appreciate the fact that you are producing something that's from your heart. I mean, I know you did that with music too, but now you get to do it with art as well.
Thank you.
So what else do you want to push? Do you want to push other stuff you've done, or where we can find you? Email addresses, Twitter, anything else?
Well, I don't, I'm still not very tech savvy, so the website is really a good thing for me. Okay. And like you said, you hit it on the head. I mean, for me, it's the same approach. My yearbook quote in high school was, "It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing," which pretty much is, if it doesn't matter how nice your guitar, how great your drum kit is, if you can't play and communicate and make people feel something, you're wasting your time and everybody else's time. So for me, when I transfer that same energy to art, because I don't do it on purpose. I just do it because it's got to feel good to me, and then hopefully someone will feel something. But what I was going to tell you is one of the gigs that I do, believe it or not, is I play with ABC, which is a British band from the 80s. They had a song called Poison Arrow and Be Near Me. And we do these tours where they're these 80s tours. And it's the first tour we did, me and the bass player played with Belinda Carlisle and ABC. And it was Human League, Flock of Seagulls. We had
been all over that.
Wang Chung, the whole deal. Anyway, I just found out I think we're going to do a summer shed tour sometime in July, and I'm sure it's going to be a similar bill. So I guess I'll just somehow keep people posted through, I guess, Facebook, or I don't know. But that's the cool thing that's coming up that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, George, do you have any other questions or concerns?
I'm sure we can definitely tie some of that stuff into our podcast and stuff like that, and links to that tour, because everybody you mentioned on that bill, I'm in to seeing anyway. So so hopefully if you get down or get over to the East Coast down south here in Florida range, I'll definitely make sure and check that out too. So
I did see on the itinerary Fort Myers.
Fort Myers, that's a couple hours south here, so that's very reasonable, very doable. Yeah. So
you got anything in the DC area?
Say again?
DC or Virginia area?
We are playing in Virginia. We did Wolf Trap before, but I don't know what I'll do, bro. I'll text it to you.
I was going to say that. Just text it to me, and I'll make sure I post all that on the podcast site, and we can get it all out there for everybody to follow you.
Yeah, we'll put some of it up on the Spotify list, too, on the song, The Tonic and Dishwalla and Edgar Winters even, and so on and so forth. So
yeah, exactly.
Great stuff, man. It's been a pleasure. It's really been a pleasure meeting and talking to you, man. It's good stuff.
Same guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, and we'll catch you on the next episode, guys. You can reach us at musicmusingfeedback at gmail.com. Have a good one.